it is fantastic to have you on. I'm really excited. A lot of my people following me probably are not that familiar with who you are. I'm not that familiar with who you are. I've kind of like stalked you on Instagram and looked through your posts and love what you're doing. I only came across you just because you posted something that like it jumped out at me on one of my posts, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder who this person is, what they're about. I clicked on you and I'm like, whoa, there's some really fascinating stuff here. This is great. And immediately
Thank
kind of
you.
jumped on. But do you want to give kind of like an overview of who you are and what you're doing in the world?
So I'm Nicole Watson. I'm known as the Life Snatcher. I'm a suicide prevention superwoman. So what I do is I talk people out of suicide, of course. I also create courses to help people find peace in the middle, because when it comes to suicide, a lot of people don't want to die. They just don't want their pain. They don't want to keep
Mm.
living the same painful day over and over again. And so if I can get people to find peace in that middle place of, I really don't want to live, but I really don't want to die. If I can bring you to a place of peace, then you will feel more empowered to speak up for yourself and to say, this is what I have going on. So I do that. Then I also work with organizations and businesses to put strategies in place to make sure that people who are suicidal have resources to go to outside of the people that they deal with. So, for example, if you're a pastor in a church, I get with you and I give you a whole strategy so that the people in your
Mm.
congregation know who to contact if they're suicidal because of domestic violence, if they're suicidal because of food insecurity, if they're suicidal because of mental illness, because there's many things that can cause people to be suicidal. So I'm pretty much an all around suicide prevention person. But my heart and my soul is in empowering people to speak up. Because so many times people are silenced and people are made to feel like their struggle isn't a real struggle. And so I want people to be able to be honest and to speak up for themselves and say, this is where I am. And then from there, they'll get the help they need because they won't be in denial anymore.
Wow. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. And so important, like, it feels like the world that I come from, this kind of Christian bubble, it feels like it is just as rife, if not even more so sometimes, with mental health issues, with different things like that. I mean, suicide is, it feels like we don't go a couple of days without hearing about some prominent Christian leader committing suicide of some sort, and everyone's surprised by it. They're like, "Oh my gosh, we never saw this coming." Even loved ones and close people, and maybe there's some dynamics in that where we put leaders on pedestals where they can't then tell people that they're struggling. But just the whole concept of mental health is very stigmatized in my experience in a lot of Christianity. Maybe in general, I think you look at people my parents' age or something, and mental health was always kind of a taboo, and going to therapy was something that all those weak people or people that couldn't stick it or handle it or put a brave face on it or whatever. But it feels like that even today still kind of it seems quite common in the church, even though much of the world has woken up to the importance of being aware of mental health, of talking about it, of finding helpful mechanisms in place. So I'm really fascinated. You talk about things like finding pastors, support networks and things like that. I mean, I talk to pastors all the time about, and I'm not a therapist. I'm immediately like, here's some people to check in with. Here's some therapy, go get trained professionals in this area. But I frequently end up talking to pastors that are going through things like this. And I'm intrigued. Do you have thoughts on why it's such a prevalent thing in people of leadership and in Christianity, or what are some of the mechanisms that kind of cause it to become such a common thing within Christianity itself specifically?
So I have two answers to that. When it comes to Christian leaders, I feel like Christian leaders carry a false burden. I'm not of the belief that Christian leaders are responsible for people's souls. That's not something I believe. I don't believe you're responsible for my life. I believe you're responsible for your specific role in my life. That's it. And so a lot of times Christian leaders take on this, I have to be a superhero. And if you mess up, I'm going to have to give an account to God. And it's like, no, you'll have to give an account to God for what you do. You don't have to give an account to God for what I do, because you can't control what I do. I think that, and also just the stigma of when you're in leadership, you're told stuff like, don't let the enemy see you sweat. And so even if you have a problem, you're less likely to reveal that you have a problem. And then even if you do reveal that you have a problem, you have people who are going to shame you. Well, where's your faith? You're supposed to be a leader. You need to suck it up. You need to figure it out, And so there's just so much just shame and stigma around people in general reaching out for help. But when it comes to people who are in leadership, there's such an unfair pressure that makes people feel like they have to be superhuman, And so that contributes a lot. And then another thing that contributes a lot is that sometimes Christian leaders can't be authentic. Meaning, if you come to a point in your faith where you see a scripture differently, whether it's tithing, whether it's sexuality, whether it's whatever it is, and you come to a new understanding of the word, right? If you're in a congregation that you depend on them to survive, you know what I mean? You can't always walk in the truth of how you feel about things, because, like, let's say you feel like you don't have to tithe, and if you don't tithe, you won't be cursed, right? So then you feel like, well, if I go and I preach this, people aren't going to give, and then I'm not going to have a salary, and I'm going to be homeless. And so you are living a double life because you believe one thing, but you preach another thing. And so when that happens, something has to break. You can't go on living that double thing forever. And then when it comes to church in general, I think people have an abusive relationship with God. The way that God is portrayed is just so, it's from the lens of the colonizers, the people who said, I oversee you, and if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to punish you. And that's the God that has been given to us. And so a lot of times when I talk to people who are suicidal, the first thing they say is, I don't know why God is so mad at me. I don't know why God keeps taking me through all this stuff. I've already shown God, And it's like, God isn't a mad scientist. God isn't sitting wherever like, oh, let me see if I do this, will they still say that I'm great? You know what I mean? And so just the false perception of God and the false perception of leadership responsibility, I think has got us into the place we're in.
Wow. Yeah, wow. There's so much in that we could unpack. I mean, that's a lot of areas and a lot of stuff. And yeah, I think you've hit the hammer on the nail on the head. Don't hit the hammer. But it really does strike me as this impossible situation. I know I used to, back in the day when I was more kind of in the kind of Christian bubble, and I'd speak in Christian churches when I travel, I'd meet so many different pastors, and I'd end up like hanging out with them at lunches or staying in their homes and things. And you talk to so many of them, and they're describing that inauthentic place that they find themselves in. And they find themselves, they're passionate about what they believe. And so obviously they're reading things, they're studying, they look into things, and then they are going to naturally, anyone that's passionate about something and looks at it is going to change their mind occasionally. That's just how we operate. We come into some new idea and go, oh, that's a better idea. It's a better way to put it. But then they're put in this conflict where they can't then present that information. They can't then even maybe live that out. Or if they do live it out, they have to live it out privately. They can't do it publicly. And like you said, that can result in a pastor who has no other real qualifications. Maybe went straight from high school to seminary to a youth pastor to associate pastor to senior pastor. And now they're making a good salary. They've got a big mortgage. They're married. They've got some kids. The kids are in school. You need to pay the healthcare, whatever it is. And suddenly it's well, if I'm honest about this new idea I have, whatever it is, not whatever it is, because some are, you can change your mind on some things. But some things you know, and if you're the pastor, you really know what those things are. If you cross that line, you are done, and it's going to be a
over.
big deal, or it's certainly a headache. You know, you're certainly going to have some really uncomfortable meetings and whatever. That's a really horrible place to live. I try and remind people that have come out of church and feel really frustrated by that dynamic and can often project a lot of stuff and turn a lot of hatred onto pastors and people in leadership. I often try and remind them that they're part of a system that abuses them. You know, everyone's a victim in this dynamic. Now, a lot of pastors are abusive people. I'm not taking that off the table. But a lot of the time, I'm like, do you have any idea how shit that would be if you were a pastor and you're stuck in that situation? Because I've talked with pastors over lunch, and they are like crying to me because they feel like they can't be themselves. And they can't really share what they want to believe. Or they're like, even if I want to get the church there, but I've got 200 people to change, and it's probably going to take 8 years what it would take if I was trying to lead one person. It might take me 5 months. But I'm trying to bring a whole group of people. And that means 8 years of not really being myself. And then by the time the 8 years is up, they're a totally different person anyway, right? They're even further along. That's a lot to be kind of navigating. Do you think that's the sort of thing that someone can navigate? Can you live in that kind of tension of not being yourself, of not being authentic? Is that the sort of thing that if someone's in that position, do they just need to get out? Do they need to bite the bullet? Do they need to find an exit strategy? Or can we live in those kind of situations of not being ourselves?
I mean, I guess it depends on how you frame it. And what I mean by that is when you're a kindergarten teacher, you know that the characters in your book aren't real. You know that pigs don't fly. You know that mice don't talk. But if you have students who believe they do, and you have to teach them in the context of where they are, then that is very possible that you will be a teacher to teach people where they are and how to relate to God and how to navigate where they are. But the thing about that is you have to reframe it in your mind, because there's a difference between, I love my baby. My baby believes in the Easter Bunny. So I'm going to roll with my baby and teach my baby lessons using the Easter Bunny. There's a difference between that and I don't want to celebrate Easter and my baby does. And because I don't want to hear my baby crying, I'm going to just pretend that there's an Easter. Because one comes from a place of love and the other one comes from a place of, let me just do what I got to do so that I don't have to hear somebody's mouth. You see what I'm saying? And so depending on where you fall, you know, are you the husband that buys your wife birthday gifts because you love her? Or are you the husband that buys your wife birthday gifts because you don't want to get fussed out on her birthday? Because depending on where your heart is and where your energy is with that, that's the outcome that you're going to get. So is it possible to say these 200 people here cognitively, they don't grasp what I'm saying, and I don't want to upset their lives and send them on a spiral? How do I navigate this? Okay, I'm gonna be in Rome and do as the Romans do. If you can do that and you come at it from a positive, I guess you could say, heart posture, I think it's possible. There are a lot of things I know about Christianity that I don't openly say. You know what I mean? Because I know that the people who follow me aren't there. And I know that if I tell them some of the stuff I know, they would be like, and they wouldn't be able to handle it because they haven't awakened to the level to be able to process what I'm saying. So a lot of stuff I keep to myself. I know it, but when I deal with them, I deal with them where they are.
That's really, really good. I like that. I think that's a very insightful concept of it. It's very much a place of how we frame that and how we, I mean, I guess most things in life are what story we give them and how we frame it. But I guess a big part of this dynamic, when I reflect on it, might be support networks as well. A lot of people that are in leadership, and I know for me, when I was in church leadership and stuff, you end up like in this bubble, right? Every day is in the church, every day is meeting with people from church. And there's this weird dynamic where all your friends and your peers aren't friends or peers. They're kind of on some level with the system that they live in, that is the way it is. They're below the pastor or the leader. Now, a lot of pastors, I'm not saying pastors and leaders are lording it over people, but there's this weird dynamic in play, but that's just created by the system that says, I on some level am better, wiser, here to be your teacher, your answer person. I am gonna be able to guide you, help you. And so even like a pastor being able to kick back and relax with his friends, there's some weird dynamic there where there's a hierarchy. And I don't know many pastors that have a good group of friends outside of their church where they have that hierarchy in place, because they just don't have time. They don't have a way to meet new people. They don't, have that dynamic. And I'm wondering because to me, I would imagine, and I've seen certainly in my own life, my mental health is deeply, like intrinsically interwoven with how well I'm doing in my community, how connected I feel with my community. I don't know if there is data on that. I've not explored that, but I know for me personally, I know for a lot of people in my life, that's definitely been a component for them anecdotally. Is that something that can be said quite, kind of quite literally, like it is essential to be having these components where maybe there isn't hierarchy, maybe there isn't this kind of weird dynamic, but there's just true friendship and community there. Is that something that's essential? And again, is that possible for people that are in leadership within churches that don't have these they don't get to escape the bubble?
I think you need to intentionally have friends that's not in the church. And I know people push back on that with the whole, what fellowship have light with darkness or whatever, but you can be dark and be in the church. So, but I think people need friends. And when I say outside of the church, I mean people that aren't in your specific thing. You know what I mean? You need friends outside of the bubble to be balanced. I also believe that inside of the bubble, you need to be able to be authentic. And if you can't find a circle in your bubble where you can be yourself, number one, that tells you a lot about your bubble. And, furthermore, we have the responsibility of building our own support systems. We have the responsibility of making sure that we are surrounded by people who represent, who we are and who represent where we are going. And so I just believe that, especially when you are in leadership, you need to be doing all you can to have a safe place and a safe space for you to be able to express yourself. Even if that means you join a book club that don't have nothing to do with church, even if that means you join a gaming community, even if that means you join a bowling league or a football league or fantasy football, or whatever people do, you need to have a place where you can go and be yourself. Because without that, you're constantly in performance mode. You're constantly in, I have to show these people that I'm this, and we weren't made to live that way.
Yeah. I think this makes me think of, the community I work with personally are people that, generally speaking, there's a mixture in there, but generally speaking are people that have radically had to redefine their faith. Maybe they found out that the Christianity they grew up with just doesn't work for them anymore. It's not the answers they had to begin with aren't answers that they can recognize as true anymore. And they're exploring new concepts, new ideas of spirituality, maybe reimagining Christianity or getting rid of Christianity. And there's a whole host of different dynamics in play there. But one of the big factors that comes into play there is, for most of them, that means an isolation of their community. Generally speaking, people that are, when either they're in that community feeling utterly alone because they can't be authentic, like you're talking about, or they decide, okay, I'm going to be authentic, and they quickly find out that you're now alienated and isolated. Truly, you're now utterly alone because you're not even in the church feeling alone. You're not allowed back into church. And those groups of people, I mean, that's the kind of advice I'm constantly giving them. Like, and it's hard in this era of like, you know, COVID and pandemic and lockdowns. But I'm always saying, like, you need to find some people to be your people. Go join a bowling club. Go get into like board games and find a local, you know, I don't know, bar that does board game nights or something. Like, you know, like try and find something that's gonna work for you, whatever that looks like. Join the progressive church, join whatever, you know, communities might work, or just get some friends, you know, around you. Make some friends at the gym and ask them if they want to go to the pub with you one night or whatever. Mm-hmm. But that's a really hard thing to do. For a lot of people, we just don't know how to make friends. People that grew up in the church, I find, don't know how to make friends because it was kind of done for us, right? Yeah. And so they're left in this middle ground where they have been isolated from the only community they know, but they don't know, how do I even begin to create a community? And that can be a really hard place. And I guess the question I was going to ask is, because I found people in that place do tend to take a real hit to their mental health. And often, along with a lot of other things that are happening in deconstruction, that can definitely lead to some suicidal tendencies and you know, thoughts, whatever that might look like. How can people that aren't going through that, you know, how can the church that has said, hey, this obviously isn't for you anymore, how can they be responding differently and supporting people? Because I think a lot of people in the church that is saying, oh, this person isn't Christian anymore, I kind of get that on some level. I can have a bit of sympathy for the church because they kind of need to be what they're about. But there's obviously a breakdown here in how they're interacting with people that are leaving. Family members that are watching a son deconstruct. Like, how do they go about creating some sort of space for that person, you know, that's going through these really radical hits on their mental health and potentially, you know, feeling suicidal, going through that kind of stuff? Like, how do people support their loved ones in that? Or maybe just friends, family?
So for one, this is something I learned. I started my deconstruction in 2014 and it was bad. I was like, I don't believe in any of this stuff no more. I ain't doing none of it. And I ain't preaching. I ain't going to church. I'm going to the beach every Sunday. Leave me alone. I'm going to watch National Geographic. I'm going to figure out how old the world is. Leave me alone. And so everybody was like, woof, you know. And when I started having questions, people started isolating me or like shunning me, secretly deleting me from groups and stuff. And I was just like, you know what, forget all of this. But here's something that I learned on my deconstruction journey. A lot of people aren't friends with you. They're friends with your commonality. And I liken it to a dialysis clinic. You wouldn't know all the people at the dialysis clinic if you weren't on dialysis yourself. So then you get a kidney, right? You don't have to go to dialysis anymore. The only relationship you built with these people was around being on the dialysis machine. So now you don't have to be on the machine. They're looking at you like, well, you're not one of us anymore. And in order for you to be one of them, you would have to pretend to have something that you no longer have, which could put yourself in danger and endanger your progress that you've made. So the first thing people in the church have to be honest about is, do you love me or do you love the fact that I was a Christian? Because if you don't love me, you don't need to say anything to me at all to help me anyway, because you don't love me. You need to go on back over there to Greater So-and-so Baptist Catholic Cathedral and love them, because you didn't love me anyway. You love the fact that I went to Greater Baptist Catholic Cathedral of Love over there. So if you do love me, you need to be able to separate whether or not I do your thing from me, because I'm not your thing. I'm a person. And so if you realize that you really do love your son, your daughter, your friend, right? You need to learn about the thing that is causing them pain. So if your son is deconstructing, whether you deconstruct or not, you need to learn what the deconstruction process is. and how it affects your mental health because you love your kid and you want your kid to be okay. You know, if your kid is having a crisis because he feels isolated from everybody in youth group because their parents told them not to talk to him anymore, you need to love your kid enough to say, well, I'm going to put you in soccer. I'm going to put you in football. I'm going to put you in martial arts. I'm going to do something to help you. And I think a lot of people have to come to terms with the fact we're not out here loving people. We're out here loving what people have in common with us. And so sometimes you don't need to do anything with the other person. You need to do something with yourself, and you need to encourage that other person to go somewhere where they are loved and where they are appreciated.
Yeah. I often say this, I'm fascinated by, if you look at a very passionate, fundamental Christian who is friends with a non-Christian, or a very passionate Republican that's friends with a passionate Democrat, I often say, like, there's no more true, beautiful, profound, loving relationship than those relationships where people have a strong ideology and they look beyond it and go, you're my friend and I love you. And it is, I think it's really telling when you look at the church broadly, and if a pastor was to say, all right, everyone, stand up. Now, stay standing up if you have a friend that is one of your top 3 friends that's non-Christian. And I guarantee 99% of that room is sitting down on the spot. And that has to say something, that we only have friends that are the same as us, that believe the same thing. If you're a Democrat, do you only have Democrat friends? And, whatever, I think that it's natural that we end up in bubbles for sure. But we should question ourselves. We question, actually, what is our relationship here? Are we just connecting these ideologies rather than really loving people and connecting through our ideology, beyond our ideology even maybe? Wow. So you look at your deconstruction. I'd love to hear about that a bit as well. How did that affect you? What were some of the blocks that kind of got poked out of your Jenga tower and started to cause it to sway? And how did that affect you? What did that do to your mental health and how you process things?
So I had a really, really mean pastor. And this person would pray for hours on end and would treat me like crap. And I said, now, God, sir, ma'am, whatever you are in the sky, how can somebody talk to you all the time, read your book all the time, and treat me so horribly? I need you to help me because I don't treat people bad. Where's the disconnect, right? So I started questioning stuff, like everything, like scriptures, just everything. And when I would go to people, they would get mad and say, well, you were never a believer anyway. Excuse me?
So it was a good one.
So the loans that I didn't pay when I was younger because I thought Jesus was coming back at any moment, that, just got off my credit back then in 2014, the torn up Bibles that I have that I done wrote all in, the prayers that I done prayed, the sermons I stayed up for hours preparing, the fasting that I did, the going to 15,000 revivals a year. What was I doing? So I'm like, so I was nothing because I got a question? That sounds like them little Jim Jones people with the Kool-Aid, because God ain't big enough for my questions. So from there, I really got mad. And then when people started to shun me, I was like, oh no, you know what? Forget y'all. And I'm going to tell you something that really broke me. And this is so crazy. I went to the aquarium in South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Ripley's Believe It or Not aquarium. And you walk in and there's this video of these crabs. And the video says that for 400 million years, like this big amount of time, these crabs have been coming to this shore, doing whatever they do, and dispersing. And I sat there and I looked at that video and I thought about it. And I was like, wait a minute. For 400 million years, or however long it was, these crabs have been doing this by themselves. They just out here living, right? So I was like, something ain't right with what these people teaching me. Something isn't right with how we don't have a connection to nature, right? So I'm African American, as you can clearly see. And African people have a strong connection to nature. And African people believe that the earth is our literal mother that sustains us, that keeps us, you know what I mean? And so then I was like, okay, but everything about the world and nature and science and stuff, people say not to believe because you have to have faith, and faith is the substance of things unseen. But the things I see make sense. And what you're telling me doesn't make sense. And it's hard for me to believe that a God who can make crabs come to the same place for millions of years like clockwork would force me to believe something that doesn't make sense. But everything else around me does make sense. That's abusive. That's like me taking my kid and telling my kid a lie about his whole life, but then every single other thing in my kid's world is true. So I tell my kid he's blue, but everybody in the world sees he's brown. But he's supposed to believe that he's blue and not brown because I said it. That's abusive. So then I'm like, okay, this ain't gonna work. So I stripped down my belief system to, I believe that there is a God. The end. I don't know. I know it's a God. It's the earth. It's dirt. Everything I can see. All right, cool. And then slowly but surely, I started adding back things in the context of my experience as a Black person. Because if you think about Scripture is written about marginalized people who were in exile, people who were abused, people who whatever. And God was on the side of the marginalized person. Yeah. God was on the side of Hagar. God was on the side of the woman who was caught in the act of adultery. God was on the side of the woman at the well, you know what I mean? And so I began to see the whole story from a different place. And I began to understand that this concept of God is outside of me, and one day God is going to come and rescue me. God is within me, and I don't need to be rescued, because any situation that I'm in, I'm strong enough and I'm powerful enough to make it through it. Because Christianity teaches you a whole bunch of self-degradation, even worship music. I'm desperate for you. Why would you be, if you believe that God is inside of your body, why would you be desperate for God? I'm not desperate for air. Yeah. I'm not desperate for food. I'm not desperate for taste buds. I'm not desperate for stomach acid. I'm not desperate for my eyesight. I'm not desperate to be able to hear. Why would I be desperate for God? Oh God, we cry out to you. We want you to hear. Well, if you're in me, can you not hear? You can't hear? You know what I mean? And so I just had to block out all of this stuff and really think that a lot of the stuff we do in the context of who we say God is, it's not logical. And so from there, I was like, God, I need you to show me what's right for me. Because I'm an individual. And I'm the only person that's going to always be with me. I'm the only person who has always been with me. There's no human being on the face of the earth who has always been and will always be with me. My grandma was with me all my life until she died. My mama has been with me all my life, but if she dies before me, she won't be with me after that. I'm going to be with me. Yeah. I'm with me 24/7. So I need you to show me how we going to interact. What are we going to do? What books are we going to read? What songs are we going to sing? Because the mainstream of this stuff doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But when I reframed it in the context of everybody is trying to know God, and some people believe that the only way God can be known is in this box, because that's the box they were put in from the time they were born, from the time they were 3, 4. You know what I'm saying? I'm not mad at you for being in the box, because I get it.
Sure.
But I know that I don't have to be in the box.
Right.
Every now and then, if I want to hang out with you in the box, I'm going to knock on the door of the box. You're going to let me in. I'm going to come in the box, and we're going to be in the box. But when I get ready to go, I know I have the freedom to not be in the box. Yeah. So, yeah, that was it.
Wow.
And I had some I tried to kill myself because I was like, I don't have any friends. Nobody loves me anymore. And coming to the realization, these people were friends with my Christianity and not me. It was horrible, because it's like you're walking away from your whole life and you won't be well received when you come back unless you go back to being what they want you to be. And, you know, it was rough on my mental health. I had some very dark days, but it was also a very powerful and peaceful time because I did what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I didn't feel trapped to, I can't say this because if I say this, people will fall away. I can't do this. I can't miss church. I can't miss Sunday school. I did what I wanted to do. If I wanted to go to the beach and lay on the ocean for 3 days, that's what I did. Because I could, because that's the freedom that we have. And we talk about freedom, but then we put ourselves in bondage because we live in an oppressive system and we don't really understand what freedom is. And so if I had to do it over again, I would do it.
It's crazy. Yeah. I think of my divorce. Just when you're saying that, like I had a divorce about, I don't even know how long ago anymore, 6, 7 years, 8 years. Mm-hmm. I can't remember. But I look back on that and I go, I would not wish that on my worst enemy. But I am so thankful for that thing that, and it was like you're saying, it was this horrible, painful. I remember literally thinking it would be easier if I just died. This would be better. And I never ever came close to thinking I will act on that thought, but definitely thought multiple times, I wish I'd just died instead. If instead of my wife leaving me, I wish I'd just been hit by a Mack truck and we'd be done. That would have been nicer, easier, like a softer hit on my ego, whatever. It's more final. I don't have to see this person that's left, like it's just, we're done, whatever it is. But at the same time, there's this little bit in me and it felt guilty of going, it's kind of nice though. I kind of get to do whatever I want. Wow, that's kind of, I like that, right? I don't know. Anyone that's been married kind of knows that dynamic a little bit, or in a long-term relationship, you're like, oh, wow, yeah, cool. I get to eat whatever I want tonight. That's cool. Or whatever, right? I get to go to the beach today. Oh, that was cool. I like that. And it's a weird kind of navigation, these kind of like extreme ups and downs and it's really hard to frame when we're trying to frame all what's going on. Why is this happening to me? What does it mean? I think a lot of my thoughts of this, it would be better if I was dead, were linked to the fact I was so heavily involved in ministry. And I really, honestly, more than my wife doesn't want to live with me and be with me forever, she'd rather leave. That hurt somewhat But if I'm honest, it didn't hurt the most. What hurt the most was, what will people that follow me think? What will happen to my ministry that I spent years building and trying to amass into an amazing thing? I have a huge ego and I want everyone to think I'm the best thing since sliced bread. People aren't going to think that anymore, right? And there's all this stuff going on. And I heard someone, I think it was a Zen Buddhist, and it intrigued me. I don't know if it's a good way to put it. I don't know if it's true, but it got me thinking. And he was talking about suicide, and he said, the thing about suicide is that people believe they need to die. And on some level, they're true. They do need to die. But it's not a physical death that they need to go through. It's an emotional death that they need to go through. And I thought about that. And again, I'm not saying that of all people that have suicide thought. I'm not in a place to make any sort of statement about that. But I thought about the times that I had thought, God, I wish I would just die instead. And I was like, that's because my ego was needing to die. My big ministry that I wanted and thought was me, that needed to die because that's not me. You know, whatever it is, the person that needed to be with this person to be validated, that needed to die. And actually letting those things die is actually what allowed me to really embrace life and be happier than I've ever been before. Can you talk into that kind of dynamic? Because, I mean, you said that you went through seasons of feeling, or you tried to take your own life, you said, right? Yeah, and that was in the midst of your deconstruction, linked to, you know, separation of community, your faith. I mean, I don't think it's, you know, every person that goes through this is going to go through that by any means, shape or form. But I do think it's a common pain because there are some major deaths going on. Our identity's wrapped up in this. So it's not even a loss of, it's a loss of ourselves. We don't even know who we are anymore. If there's no God, then who am I? Or if God's different, well, what have I done with my life? And there's a lot of regret. There's all these different things going on. How do people navigate all these things in a healthy way? How do people not end up tangling all that into I need to die, you know, in a physical sense?
So I think you have to have safe deconstruction spaces. You have to find people who are on the journey with you. Me being an African American, it was a little harder because a lot of white people aren't ready to admit that embedded into Christianity is white supremacy. And you can't deconstruct one without deconstructing the other, because white supremacy is what drove Christianity to be what it is. So you can't, you know what I mean? And so that was really challenging for me. But, you know, I was able to navigate through that. I think another thing you have to do is you have to grieve. I had to grieve the fact that I would never be a church elder. Because, you know, that's like the pinnacle. Like,
right.
Ooh,
You've been spending the last how many years working towards that, and suddenly it's like, oh, I never get to do that? That's a huge thing to grieve.
All these years of being faithful, being loyal, doing all the things, buying the clothes, and I'm not going to get not that was my motive, but in the natural progression of things, when you work at the job for 10 years and you come to work every day on time, you expect to get a promotion, you know? And so coming to terms with the fact that I would never, quote, be anything in church or with church people, that was tough. Because I was known as a church girl. Yeah. I was known as a praise and worship singer. I was known as a preacher. I had other stuff, but it's like, I've been in church all my life. I started working in church when I was 7.
Wow.
I started playing the piano for the youth choir when I was 7. So we're not talking about I've been in church 2 years. We're talking about I hardly know a time when I wasn't. You know what I mean? And so you have to go through the stages of grief. Being upset, being depressed, being sad, being in denial, whatever they are, I can't remember. But you got to go through them. Therapy helped me a lot. Therapy is when I when I realized that there's a trauma that comes with Christianity. Believing that at any moment you can die and go to hell is traumatic.
Yeah, big time.
Believing that your friend who didn't pray your prayer, who died at a young age, is in hell, and you're like 12 and your brain is still developing, that's traumatic. And so learning how to be honest about the fact that even though people can mean you well, they can still do you harm. And it doesn't mean they didn't mean you well. You know what I mean? There are two different things. You meant well and you did harm. They're two different things, you know. Coming to terms with that really helped me. And then giving myself permission to know that if all I ever believe is that there is a God and God is love, I'm good. I'm good. I don't have to work to be in a particular community. I don't have to work to practice a particular religion. I don't have to work to do all these things that people say you have to do to be with God or to be loved by God or to be known by God. Because something that is. I'm Black, whether I'm mad, whether I'm happy. And so if God is love, God is love. Leave me alone, you know? And so I just had to really, 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 really allow myself to grieve and then just stand up in the fact that it's okay to be who you are. And all that little your best isn't good enough and your best is like filthy rags and oh my God, you're terrible. And da, da, da. You have to purposely let that stuff go. And when you feel it bubbling up, like when you have an accomplishment, right? And somebody's like, oh, you did great. You're like, oh, that was not me. That was the Lord. No, that was you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
God was in the whole Bible telling people, I will make your name great. I'll make your name great. Not I will make my name great with you. So then when people say you're great, you say, no, it's not me. It's God. No, it's you. And if you really believe that God created people in the image of God and the likeness of God, that means that God is manifesting on this planet as you, which means you are amazing. You are wonderful. You are powerful. You are the shiznit. You know what I mean? And I had to really drill that. And even now, I still have to drill it in my head like, girl, God came on this planet as you. Period. Forget them people. Forget all that foolishness. God came to this world as you, with your personality, with your crazy ways, with your talents, with your everything, you know, and just going through the process of letting the old me die. Gone. Can't find her. Gone. And letting the new me be resurrected. And really, that's the story. When Jesus was resurrected, he was different. He had powers and abilities that he didn't have before. And the sorrow and the anguish and the turmoil that he felt in his body, he no longer had to feel because he detached himself from that state of existence and moved on to a higher plane. So even though he looked the same, he embodied something different. And so that's the process I went through. And you have to be intentional about it. And you have to let yourself grieve and cry and be sad because you're not ever going to be the same. Even if you try to go back, it won't be the same.
Yeah. That's really good. Have you read Richard Rohr's Falling Upward?
I haven't.
Oh,
I need to
it's
write
so
that
good.
down.
It just jumped out at me in that thought, but like he talks about the first stage of life is about, building me and developing
Mm-hmm.
me and figuring all that stuff out. But the second stage of life, usually sparked by some great suffering, a loved one dies, someone gets cancer, whatever it is. And
Mm-hmm.
suddenly the second part of life is realizing all this stuff, the identity, the church, these things I'm attached to that I think are me. What is all that? It's not me. And letting that stuff die, letting that stuff go. And he talks about it as falling up. But it's exactly what you're talking about there. And it's Jesus, the story of the cross and the resurrection. It's the same thing. It's this kind of like, it's a stepping into a whole nother plane of existence, like you said, a whole
Mm-hmm.
nother level of consciousness. And I think this is one of the things that, the church demonizes suffering, and it demonizes depression, mental health, all these different painful processes that we go through. And I don't want to glorify depression, mental health, things like that, or say that these are good things. But
Mm-hmm.
what I will say is they are certainly teachers in ways that having a great day just won't teach you the same lesson.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. And actually going through crazy seasons of being depressed, anxious, stressed, whatever it might be, even suicidal, that teaches people profound things. If they are, if they are able, if they have the tools, if they have the support systems, if they have therapists, whatever it is that might help them to learn from that teacher, it can be a profound thing. I look at my mother dying, probably the worst experience I've probably had practically in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I look at it as the most significant moment in my life and probably the most beautiful and important moment in my life. And I don't think I wouldn't be me without it.
Mm-hmm.
And so would I wish someone's mother died? No. But do I wish them the grace that I learned through that? Is there a way that they could get that grace? God, I hope so, because I would wish that on any human being. I would be so excited for them to grow and learn in that way in their life. And I think there is this, so I think there's this profound opportunity in these moments of suffering that we don't find in the moments of joy and happiness. And I think the church is losing its opportunity to actually be a vehicle for change for these people rather than shutting down, hiding, ignoring. These are the kind of default responses. I was reading a statistic the other day. I'm really fascinated what you think about it. But it jumped out. It was from I think Lifeway research, and they did a readiness survey on suicide, and I think I had our conversation in my mind last week, and I was like, I'm just going to look at some different things, and it popped up, and I was like, well, I'll read that because it's going to be really interesting. But they asked Protestant church leaders in America, do you think your church is capable of handling someone that is suicidal and helping them? And 80% of them said they felt comfortable dealing with someone that was suicidal. What's really interesting is when they were asked how many of you who have known someone close to you that has committed suicide, how many of you knew there was a problem? Only 40% of them even knew there was a problem. And I'm really intrigued by that dynamic where the church seems to be quite arrogant in a sense, thinking it knows what it's doing. In fact, the other statistic I read in line with this was that 41% of pastors have had any level of training in suicide prevention. Mm-hmm. And yet, so that jumped at me that 41% have had training, but 80% of the church go, yeah, we're good. We got this. We could totally help someone that's in this place. And it feels like there's this real issue in the church where they're just not aware of what's going on. They're not trained to help. They're not aware of what's going on. They're just burying these things. They're creating environments where it can't come to the surface, where it can't be dealt with. Can you speak to that a bit? I'm sure you have lots of experience in this area and have come across people in that situation.
So most of the people who come to me who are suicidal are church people. Let's start there. Like you said, church people, our church leaders especially, do have an arrogance, and they don't have an understanding that mental illness is a real thing. They think because you can't see it, that makes it spiritual and you just pray about it. But no, that's not what it is. The church has reinforced the stigma around mental health so bad and made it, they equate it to you have a lack of faith if you don't believe in God and all that, when in all actuality, they need to take the time to educate themselves about what's going on. I think it's interesting when I talk to pastors, they always say, we have a good prayer ministry. And we know that God is greater than depression. Okay. But the people in your church are still depressed. And correct me if I'm wrong, but believers have died from the coronavirus. So all of your faith over fear, all of your God is bigger than, people still died, right? Yeah. So let's come out of the clouds, come back down to where we live, and let's figure out what's going on, because you're not a mental health professional.
Yeah.
When members come to you and say, my leg is broken, you pray for them, right? But they go to the doctor and they get a cast. Because without the cast, their leg is still going to be broken, right? You have to get over yourself if you are a spiritual leader, and quit thinking that you and your prayers are a magic potion that's going to cure depression. Mm-hmm. Jesus had a whole anxiety attack in the garden. The dude was in the garden, right? And he was so stressed out that he started sweating drops of blood. Now, if that's not a panic attack, I don't know what the dude was sweating drops of blood. And so if you're teaching that this stuff is going on, and it never said Jesus got all right and he was happy. He just came to a resolve like, well, this is what I got to do. All right, But he wasn't jumping for joy. He ain't going to have no going away party with the little people. But he was still upset. He was still in agony. He was like, God, why did you leave me up here? That's despair. To say, I am my Father of one in one breath, and then in the next breath say, God, why did you leave me? That's despair. You know what I mean? And so, because a lot of times people in church are in denial about their own mental health, they can't help other people. Because you got to think about it. If you're a pastor and you can't show weakness, Jesus was touched with the feelings of our infirmities because Jesus also showed weakness. Jesus was crucified on the cross, as the Bible says that he was, however you feel about it, in front of everybody. Everybody saw his little half-naked self up there being made a mockery of. So he was touched with the feelings of our infirmities because he allowed himself to feel. He allowed himself to feel like we feel. But a lot of people in church leadership, to be quite honest, they don't allow themselves to feel because they see feeling as a sign of weakness. They see feeling as, if I show them that I feel like them, they won't respect me. If I show them that I get sad too, they won't look up to me anymore. I won't be pastor with the Superman cape on if I show them that I went through 3 months of depression when my mama died. Yeah. So I got to pretend that I was good because I got to be super pastor. I got to pretend that I'm okay. So then, of course, when I come to you, super pastor, and I have the issue, you don't even have the ability to be touched by how I feel because you shut that part of yourself down. So you just think, oh, that's nothing. We're going to take you to the altar and you're going to be okay. Because people who have shut down their emotions can't be sensitive to other people's emotions.
Yeah.
And so
No,
I
I mean,
think
it kills empathy, right? There is no empathy where you can't understand what someone's
cannot,
feeling if you don't feel it.
cannot. And so I think when it comes to church leadership, you don't just have to be honest about how you help suicidal people. You have to first be honest with yourself and the feelings that you're out here having all the time. And then after that, you have to admit the pastor was never designed to be the end all be all. In the book of Acts, the Bible says, and they had all things common. They had all things common, right? So you have to learn as a leader to tap into the resources that are around you, because you're not the only resource. I know you may want to be, because it's job security and it makes you feel good when you go home that everybody is worshiping your holy name, whatever, right? But you're not equipped to be everything to people. And downplaying mental illness is one of the most ungodly things you could do.
Yeah.
Elijah was like, God, I want you to take my life right now. Bruh, I want you to come and I want you to rapture me up, or whatever you're going to do with the whirlwind, or however you're going to do it. I want you to do it right now. Not when I'm done, but right now. You know what I'm saying? We have to be honest about the fact that this is a part of life. And you don't just wish it away with your 3 scriptures and a prayer, you know? And so I think there's just a level of honesty that people in the church need to come to, period. And if they do that and they understand we are mere humans, from the bishop on down to the person that sweeps the floor, we all human. You know what I mean? It'll help them to not be so dismissive of mental illnesses and mental issues. And it'll help them to see, wait a minute, this is a real thing, you know? And a lot of them, like I said, they have mental issues. But I can't validate yours and then pretend mine isn't real.
Yeah.
Because if I give a voice to yours, when I get home, how am I going to deal with mine? You get what I'm saying? And so, yeah, they got to be honest.
Yeah. I feel like there's a complication in the whole discussion with this kind of extreme black and whiteism as well, where you're either perfectly well or completely, like, you know, screwed and gone asunder, you're chronic depression and suicidal. But it feels like on some level, I mean, our mental health, like our physical health, is a great big spectrum. Some days I'm a bit run down with a cold, you know, whatever it is. And some days I get a little low. There's not as much pip in me. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm thinking about something that happened the other day and it really hurt and it upset me, and I've not really processed it consciously yet, but it's simmering and I just don't feel that great. But after a couple of days, even if I don't deal with it, I'm probably going to be back up and running and fine.
Yeah.
But other days I break my leg and I'm not going to be walking well for like 6 months, whatever, you know, and I might need some help and some rehabilitation. And then there are people that have, you know, like, chronic pain, whatever that is. And that might be a chronic depression or something. But like, there is this grand spectrum that I think we're not recognized. When we don't recognize, look, we all have ups, we all have downs. We don't need to then categorize every up as like, oh, good Jesus moment, and that's you as a good Christian. And then every down is definitely the devil's attacking, you're wrong, you're broken, you're whatever. And then we categorize them in these 2 extreme camps. You know, it's not just oh, you're having a slightly up day, slightly down day. That's happening. You know, we're variations. Things happen to us. We move one way, we come another way. Like, I feel like there needs to be a normalization of how we respond to our emotions, how trauma comes up and we go, oh gosh, I never noticed that before. This is going to be an interesting few weeks while I work on this, you know, or whatever, months or years, who knows? Some trauma is quite deep. But that should be normal, or at least normalized, hopefully.
Yeah, and I mean, your brain is an organ. Like, your brain isn't some magical, mystical ball of dust in your head. It's an organ like your stomach. So you know how sometimes your stomach is queasy and nothing is really wrong. Your stomach is just being funny today, and you're like, oh, my stomach is kind of, and then the next day you're good. But then sometimes you have a stomach virus and you ain't good. You got to figure it out. Or you may have stomach ulcers, or you may eat the wrong thing and get food poisoning. You know what I'm saying? Your brain is the same way. When you go through a trauma, it changes your brain. It changes your chemical balance. It changes the way your brain functions. And I think sometimes we forget, the same way your little bubbly stomach is the up and down of life. Sometimes your bones ache. Sometimes you sleep wrong and your neck feels funny. Your brain is the same way. Like, it's not some mystical, magical spectrum of life from an alternate universe. It's a part of your body like every other part of your body. And I think in the church and in the world, we overcomplicate it when it's not that deep. Like, if I say to you, how are you doing today? And you say, well, my stomach is a little, I'm like, oh, well, maybe you need some ginger ale or something. And I'm going to move on. I'm not going to make you feel like you a bad Christian because you got the bubble guts. I mean, you got the bubble guts. It'll be okay, you know? But when it comes to mental health, like you said, it's so extreme. Like, you need to have faith. No, I have the bubble guts in my brain. And if I take a nap, my brain will calm down and I'll be okay.
Yeah. It does. It feels like, I mean, I've been in a lot of different churches over my years, just as a member, as a part of it. And quite a few of them, you're in there, you're on Sunday morning, service is over, you start talking to people over tea and coffee and cookies or whatever, and it's a, hey, how are you? And everyone's fine. Yeah, good. It's great, you know, and then goes home to weep for 8 hours or whatever, you know, like, or maybe not quite that extreme, but some people are, and some people are just going home a bit like, oh, actually, I was a bit down and I wish someone had asked the right question or dug deeper or whatever. But there was an element where they felt they could only say fine. They didn't feel
because
safe
that's the
to
expectation.
Say, actually, I'm not doing that great. I'm having a real rough week or whatever. It's really, really, it's just one of these things that it just feels a very toxic component within how we have structured our faith, and for a lot of people. And there's some churches, I'm sure, that do this amazingly. I have no doubt.
Yeah.
But it does feel broadly as a structure, certainly anecdotally from my experience, that and the experience of people talking to me, that has been their experience. You mentioned when you were going through your deconstruction, there were certain things that, certain beliefs that were specifically very toxic in how it then affected your mental health. Certain things that were maybe more triggering in you wanting to kill yourself or things like that. What do you think are some of the, you know, if I was to say, like, what are the top 3, 4, 5 beliefs that kind of are quite common within Christianity that really damage our faith, that really need to change? If the church is going to see a breakthrough in helping people have a healthy mental health and believing in God and following Jesus, whatever that looks like, what needs to change? What beliefs are just really not compatible with being a healthy, whole human, in your opinion?
Number one, that God is outside of us. God is not outside of us. So, like, you know, we say, I pray to God as if God is like, that's very damaging, because when I was in deconstruction, I was like, God, where are you? Like, where are you? I don't feel you with me. Where are you? Instead of
God
realizing
that's coming and going constantly based on our behavior.
Like, today I'm with you, but girl, you use profanity? No, ma'am. Goodbye. You gotta get me back. You gotta go to church and cry, and then I'll come back. Like, so I had to totally get rid of that. Not trusting myself was a big one. You know, people say lean not to your own understanding, and you're not supposed to trust your feelings, and you're not supposed to trust yourself, because then your flesh wills no good thing. Well, Paul didn't say in my flesh dwells no. He said in his flesh. That was his issue that he had going on over there in wherever he was at. with all them churches writing all them letters. That was him. That didn't have nothing to do with me. So I don't have to take on all of Paul's issues. All of that when I would do good and I don't, and sometimes I want to and then I don't, and sometimes I can. I don't have to take that on. That was him telling his story. I don't have to make that apply to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm a good person. Full stop. I'm a great person. Whether I'm in church or out of church, whether I'm preaching or coloring with my God baby, I'm an amazing person.
There's been a lot of research in that as well. I remember there's a big deal a couple of years ago. Do you remember the girl with an eating disorder that wrote to John Piper? Do you remember that? And he wrote back and basically was like, well, of course you have an eating disorder because you're sinful and a piece of crap. And it was like, oh my God. But I remember reading a response, like a public response from a chartered clinical psychologist.
Really?
Saying, hey, here's some data for your ass, John, and just dropped research paper after research paper that said, your flavor of Christianity is why people are ill. And she dropped like these really interesting papers. I'll Google it and I'll send you a link afterwards. Remind me if I don't, because I might forget, because it's going to be like 2:00 in the morning by the time I'm done. I might go to bed. But remind me, because I think you'll find it interesting. But she dropped these links to these articles. I remember reading through them, and it specifically said, when you compare forms of Christianity that teach you are a filthy, rotten sinner, just a worm, an ant, and, spider dangling over hell, that kind of idea, when you compare that form of Christianity with Christianities that teach you are a good, healthy, beautiful creation in the image of God, the mental health differences are night and day. Depression changes, eating disorders change, whatever it is, there's a significant gap between these two types of Christianity. And I was like, oh, that is profound. So just, I guess just to encourage like people listening in, that second point, I'm sure there's probably data on a lot of these because religion and mental health is studied quite a bit. But that second point, I've read specific things saying if you teach people that they're filthy, rotten sinners, it will have a negative effect, which we shouldn't be surprised by, right? I mean, that feels fairly obvious, actually, if we just take a step back and look at it and go, yeah, of course people feel crap if you teach them they're crap. Like, it's crazy, especially combined with that first one, right? God needs you to be good, to be with you. Otherwise, he's away from you. By the way, you're not good. Oh, thanks. So he's always away, and then I can just occasionally close the gap by being really good. Great.
Sometimes, possibly. But then when you have people in abusive relationships and you wonder why they stay, and it's like you taught them that God was an abuser. You taught them that God withholds himself from you until you perform and beg and plead and beg him to show up with you. But then he's not going to stay because this is just a visitation from him. And then he's going to go back over there and not like you or not be with you or not pay you any attention until you beg him again.
Yeah.
And that's why so many relationships mirror that in Christianity, because that's the way, people portray God. And then this is the biggest one. When I found out that I don't have to live by every word in the Bible, like when I found out that the Bible was constructed a particular way, right? And I found out that a lot of the stuff that was said wasn't said to me. It was said to a specific group of people in a specific time. And I could use that as a way to relate to God, but I didn't have to make that my life. Like the letters in the New Testament were Paul's mail. So that's like if I read your emails to your next podcast guest, and then I base my whole life off your emails. I don't know what that person said to you. I don't know how long y'all been emailing. I don't know who y'all talking about, but because you said in your email, we should eat cake at 3 o'clock every day for the rest of my life, I eat cake at 3 o'clock.
To be fair, that sounds pretty good. I take that out of context.
So when I found out that I could engage with scripture for what it was, and that didn't mean that I literally had to do what the people did, I was like, oh, so I'm actually okay. So I don't have to live in turmoil of I always want to do good, but then I don't. But then it's not me doing bad, it's the sin doing bad. But then like I can just be a good person. I don't have to live in depravity. I don't have to believe that every single good thing about me, the best of me, is equated to a filthy rag. I don't have to take that on and embody that in my life. I can go to God and present God my good stuff, and God will be like, girl, this is really good. And not cast me away and make me feel like nothing. That did it for me. I was like, I got it. And people don't understand how liberating it is. And see, here's the thing. People like to be punitive. And they like to know that somebody else is being punished. And in Christianity, there's such a polarization. God or the devil. And if it's not God, it's the devil. And if it's not light, it's dark. Well, maybe it's dusk. Because at dusk, it's kind of dark and it's kind of light. Maybe it's dawn. Because at dawn, it's kind of dark, but it's kind of light too. You know what I mean? And so just realizing that everything didn't have to be so boom and boom. And some stuff could just be, I don't know what this is, whatever, you know. That was the most liberating thing ever.
Yeah. Wow. I think once you knock over that totem pole, all the other things on the table that we're scared to question, we suddenly can go, oh, of course I can look at that now. And actually the Bible might even inform me because I can read the Bible differently and in a more open way. It's not even necessarily most people that start deconstructing and questioning the Bible aren't actually throwing the Bible out. They're just learning how to approach the Bible differently. They still often very much value it. I know some people don't, but that's not the most common position. But it does mean that suddenly the past that screamed at your whole life, well, hell is that? That's just the way it works. If you don't say the prayer, you go to hell, and that's the way it is. Well, once you start to go, oh, there's different ways to look at the Bible, you suddenly start reading those passages every time it mentions hell in the English, and you start going, well, what does it mean in the Greek? What does it mean in the Hebrew? Oh, and who were those people, and what was the context, and why did he say that? And it doesn't actually say a lot of the things my pastor said. So we can start to read that in a new way that we just didn't have the freedom to do when we just assumed the scripture was black and white, there's no gray, and my pastor tells me what's black or what's white, and that's it. I just have to live with that. It's a huge, huge one that crumbles. Wow.
Yeah. That changed everything for me. Just being like, oh, I can really live my life. Like I don't have to be a slave. Because, you know, Paul was really big on, I'm a bond servant.
Right.
And he was a bond servant. You know, but that doesn't mean I have to be in literal slavery to God. And every time there's a church service, I have to go and I have to read my Bible 12 hours a day. And I have to pray for 3 hours. And I can be myself. You know what I mean? I can have casual conversations with God. Like, yo, I'm about to get on this podcast. I don't know how it's going to go. I need you to help me. That's it. Ain't got to say, precious Father, in the name of Jesus, we come to you right now. I could just talk. You know what I mean? It changed. I've never been the same since. I've been out here chilling. And I don't feel like I'm going to hell because I ain't out here telling people to pray. I don't even know the prayer and you, Father, I'm a sinner. And I don't even remember it. But because, you know, you got to get your body count. Like, you got to go out here and tell these people, and they got to say these words, because if they don't, they're going to burn forever, and it's going to be your fault because you saw them at the grocery store. And you mean to tell me I don't have to live under the pressure of always asking the cashier at Walmart if she knows the Lord? You mean to tell me I could just be nice to the cashier at Walmart? Just be nice to her, and then I can go on with my day? I'm not responsible for whether or not she goes to heaven or hell. You know what I mean? Just freeing myself, because literally that's how they make you feel. That cashier at Walmart could walk out of there and die, and you had the opportunity to minister to her and you didn't. So then I'm responsible for whether or not the lady at Walmart, I just needed some eggs, right? Because I was going to make an omelet. So now I'm sitting here like, I didn't get the lady to pray the prayer. She could go outside, have a car accident, die, and go to hell. Because I didn't. It's too much pressure.
Well, and where do you stop, right? Because what about the woman that was standing behind you, waiting for you to? You should probably go and ask her if she knows Jesus. And then what about the person at the till that there's a person at the till you're not even at, the next one along? What if they don't know Jesus, right? And what about the person in the parking lot collecting the trolleys? I mean, I'm not near him, but I could go over and talk to him. And then there's a car driving by. Maybe I should stop that car. And I mean, where does that end, right? Because on some level, if we really believe this, I mean, we would be, right? I mean, we would be running after every single person going, please get saved.
Please get saved.
It shows this weird dynamic where on some level we don't really believe it, and I don't think we ever did. And on another level, we do believe it, and we torment ourselves with it, right? We kind of live in the gray between those two extremes probably as well.
Yep.
It's really harrowing. And I guess, did you go through... Did you go through a season where you were panicking, where you were, oh God, what if I am wrong? What if I do go to hell for this stuff? Like, you talk about how you felt free from that, but was there a season in between those two kind of like extreme positions where you were like, I kind of don't believe that stuff. I think God's better than that. But also a kind of nagging thing of like, actually, what if the pastor is right and I'm going to really hurt for this one?
No.
Yeah?
And a lot of people do. A lot of people do, right? But I didn't. Once I backed away from everything, and the scripture that will always stand out with me is, there is no fear in love. Perfect love casts away fear. Perfect love casts out all fear, right? So if God loves me, and God unconditionally loves me, right? David said, if I make my bed in hell, meaning if I'm intentionally in a place and I set up shop, right? You're going to be with me. So there's nowhere I can go that you're not there. So in my quest for the truth, if you're not going to help me find the truth, I'm lost anyway. Yeah. So I had to depend on God, whatever that is going to help me to know the truth. And the truth will make me free. And so in order for the truth to make me free, I can't be afraid. And I can't go back to the whole be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. I can't go back to feeling like God is this other thing. It's kind of like if you have a kid and you're teaching your kid how to ride the bike, right? Kid on the bike. The kid either has to trust that you're his dad and you're not going to let him fall, or the kid thinks that you're going to at any minute sling him out into oncoming traffic and kill him, right? When that kid steps on that bike, he got to be like, okay, my daddy got me, and I'm going to keep pedaling. And the more he pedals and he sees that You ain't flung them out on the oncoming traffic. It becomes second nature. He don't even think about it. You get what I'm saying? So once I reframed my concept of God as the dad, and I say dad loosely because I don't believe that God is a man. That's a whole nother story. But the dad who is helping me on the bike, you know, I can't believe that you're my dad who loves me and believe that you're going to fling me out. I got to pick one.
Yeah.
And so I picked one and I went with it. And I haven't been scared of going to hell. I haven't been, like, I just haven't. Because I picked the dad, the nice dad.
Sure.
And I know some people do. Some people, because again, the trauma of it all. And when you go through a trauma, your body is going to do, your reptilian brain is going to do all it can to keep you safe. But because I went to therapy, you know what I'm saying? A lot of those trauma responses I didn't have. So I'm not saying you won't, because you probably will, because it's a trauma response. Like, oh my God, I'm going to go to hell because, you know, but you got to push through it. You know, you gotta find what your truth is and how you're going to relate to God. And it's different for each person, and that's fine. I think it should be. I think if God, who created everything, could be confined to a collection of 66 books, that would be a horrible, in all of these years that we've been here, in what's this, 2020? So like over 2,000 years ago, God stopped. Like that was it. We just gonna roll with this forever, you know? That would be kind of crazy, you know? And so I just feel like God is bigger than any one person or one book or one anything's experience of God. And you should always be trying to experience something different.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I absolutely love it. I love it. And it makes me feel a little bit more sane, because I talk to people day in, day out that are going through these kind of things. And it's a very common thing for people to go through these very traumatic experiences, fears, you know, worries, live with that. I never had that either myself. I kind of was just like, no, I'm good. And I often think, am I just a psychopath? I don't know. So at least if I am, maybe there's two of us. So, but I do think it's normal, you know. Different people's responses are going to be different because they're different people. They have different trauma. They've got different experiences. They've got different support structures, different psychological makeup of decades of living certain ways and being around certain people and all that.
And honestly, as I look back over my life, I never really believed in hell anyway. Like in the back of my mind, I was just like, you mean tell me this dude just gonna let people burn up? Like if you're on fire, how do you not burn? Like, how do you not burn up? I mean, it in the back of my head, it just was never logical to me. So I think that has a lot to do with why I didn't really fear it, because it never made sense to me. Like, what would be the point?
Yeah.
Like, if you're in heaven with all the good people, like, why would you?
Yeah. It just didn't seem on any level compatible with love, with even if you take love off the table and you just go hard justice, right? Which is, it seems that's what a lot of Christians go for. But even if you go for a punitive type of justice, because there's restorative forms and things like that. But if you just go for punitive, God says if you kill someone, that means you get killed. Well, you can't do that for eternity. You have to kill them. Or even if, okay, we won't kill you, we'll torture you. For what? Like, at what point is it to be punished for something? It's not punishment when you're 20 trillion years in, right? And you're getting punished for your, I don't know, cheating the taxes, and not saying a prayer. And then it's like, all right, has Steve had enough? God's like, nope, let's keep doing this for another 20 trillion years and I'll check in. Like, at a certain point, God's just a bit of a dick, right? Like, I mean, he's not punishing this. He's like getting off on it. It's weird. It's just like, this is not punitive. This is vindictive. It's
Yeah.
unhealthy. To me, I'm like, that just seems crazy. It always kind of did on some level, but everyone I asked would just be like, well, that's the way it is, so stop asking questions. So.
Yeah, because you're going to go to hell if you keep asking.
Right, it's a weird thing. So, but I don't really believe in that, but well, you're going to go there. And I'm like, I know, but I don't really believe in It's a weird one. Really, really weird. Nicole, thank you so much for coming on. I want to be really sensitive to our time. But if people want to track with you, if they want to follow what you're doing, make use of the different resources that you're putting out. I know you do different things. You coach, you do amazing stuff in helping people that are going through, suicide prevention stuff that you do, but you also do great empowerment and stuff. What's the best way people can track with you and get access to those kind of resources?
I live on Instagram. My Instagram is my name, Nakollewatson. So people can follow me on Instagram. I also have a website, my name, NicoleWatson.com. And yeah, that's where I hang out in these internet streets.
And what are some of the things that you offer, like that people might be interested in? Give us a little breakdown of some of the stuff that you do.
So I have a masterclass called I Love God, but I Hate My Life. I have a safety plan for people. So like if you have a loved one who is suicidal or who deals with like mental health challenges, I have a safety plan that you can download and fill out with them. So like if they are depressed and they get missing one day, you'll know where they likely went. They'll have people to call and stuff. It's really amazing. So I have that. I have the Ultimate Suicide Prevention Guide, which I wrote. It is a comprehensive suicide prevention resource guide. And it also has video courses. I have a suicide prevention devotional called I Speak Life. Let's see, I have free mental health resources for women of color. And I just have a bunch of stuff. I have a suicide and social media online course, just lots of stuff.
That all sounds amazing. And I'm sure there's plenty of people listening to this going, gosh, yes, I need that. So I'll put all the links to those things in the show notes on YouTube below or in your podcast on your app. Do check those things out. I really appreciate you taking the time. Can I ask one last question? I'm really intrigued. You talked about when you were deconstructing and you were talking about the component of deconstruction without decolonizing. And a lot of people that are deconstructing, in my experience, I've come across this. Like I say this often. I ask frequently, who do people want on my podcast? And I the first time I did it, I was overwhelmed when I started to look at the data, and I had about 100 names people gave me and said, oh, could you do this and this and this? And some of them obviously got mentioned a lot, some maybe just a little bit. I went through those 100 names and I looked at how it broke down. And of the 100 names, 12 were women. Of the 100 names,
wow,
2 were not white. 2. And I understand that I'm in a bubble. I'm white. I probably attract white people to me more than I might attract a black, indigenous person of color or something outside of my race. So I do understand there's a bubble component to any of these things. But I'm really interested in who were some people or who are some people now maybe for you that you've since discovered that are black, indigenous, person of color, that have been helpful for you in your deconstruction. Because I would love to, first of all, for me, I'd love to connect with them. I'd love to talk with them. I'd love to engage with them. But I know a lot of people listening to my podcast, watching my podcast, when they see I have someone that isn't white, they get excited because they're like, oh, he found someone to talk to. And I go out of my way to find people in this space that are talking about deconstruction, that are talking about different specialities within the framework of deconstruction. And I find it very hard to find people myself personally. And so I'm really interested if you have some names that people can check out that you recommend.
I have one name.
Okay.
And this person, because when I first started, I was like, this ain't it for me. Like, if you're not going to talk about white supremacy, you're not helping me. Because I'm black out here, right? So, Joe Lumen.
Yes.
Listen.
I love Joe.
Changed my life. Like, just to see somebody who understands that white supremacy is at the root of things. And you can acknowledge white supremacy without saying you're a bad person. Mm-hmm. You can say, I'm a white man and white supremacy is bad. That doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make white people bad. It makes white supremacy bad. So seeing her work validated me, like, I'm really not crazy out here.
Yeah.
Because I would get in deconstruction groups and I love them. I love all the people out here doing the deconstruction work and the ex-evangelicalism and the whatever you want to call it, right? But I can only go so far with them because I'm like, but y'all not talking about colonization.
Yeah.
You're just becoming a different type of what you live because you're not getting to the root of the problem. Yeah. And the root of the problem is colonization. And so you went and created another colony. It was just a different, because you didn't deconstruct colonization. So you don't know that that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's like people who are addicted to crack and then they get off crack and they get addicted to heroin. Because they were so busy worrying about crack, they forgot you're an addict. Mm. So if you get rid of crack, but you don't get rid of your addiction, you're going to be addicted to something else. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, Joe, that's it.
I love
Joe is everything.
I hear you. I say again and again and again, she's one of my favorite people out there, periods, doing anything. And someone that cuts me deep frequently. And I need that in my life. And as a white male European, like I check like every box there is on privilege, maybe a few somewhere that I don't check, like, but I am doing well on privilege and learning. Gosh, I am so sexist. Gosh, I am so racist. Not, you know, the difference between impact and intent. I'm not intentionally sexist or racist. I think I have been in the past, but certainly growing to the point where I'm certainly not intentionally those things, but I certainly am still in my impact sometimes those things. And I go, gosh, how can I help? Even talking about, you know, who do I have on my podcast? And I'm going, gosh, my podcast, it could be more anti-racist. I could be really, and I could be more intentional. I could really cut apart a big chunk of my week and go, okay, let's give us 2-3 hours to really researching. I could message every person of color that follows me. I could say, hey, who do you follow? Who could, you know, I could be more intentional. And so you go, yeah, nope, still not that much of a driving force for me. And so interesting, those kind of things that Joe kind of brings at me. Sorry, go for it.
I just thought of someone else.
Okay, yes.
Candace Bimbo.
How do you spell
Candace? Her first name is Candice, and her last name is Ben as in Nancy, Bow. So she is a womanist theologian, I guess you would say, and she does a lot of work with deconstruction in terms of like the Black church, but her views about God and marriage and just God being with the oppressed people and just getting rid of patriarchy and misogyny and the concept of soul ties, that when you sleep with somebody, their soul is in your soul, or what I don't know how it goes, but you know, she is amazing.
Wow. Okay, awesome. I'm going to check her out. Is she out on Instagram somewhere?
She is. Yep. Yes. She's on IG. Good. She's writing a book.
That's where I live. So as soon as someone's on Instagram, I'm like, great, I'm going to really track them. As soon as they start being on Facebook or Twitter, I'm like, oh, no. Yeah. So that's great to hear.
She's amazing.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate you helping with that as well, because
no problem.
I'm constantly trying to be like, okay, how can I grow in this area? And how can I expose people and also ensure that people that are going to gravitate to, oh, there's a white guy, I'm going to listen to that podcast. I want the person that's their default, maybe subconscious thought. I want them to be exposed to different voices as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's huge.
So I appreciate you making time to have this conversation with me.
Likewise.
And such a great work that you do to help people that are going through what is ultimately one of the hardest things that anyone can navigate and go through, and to dedicate your life to helping people in that place, to creating resources, to coming alongside people, to raising awareness. It's such a beautiful and deeply Christ-like work. You know, it's incredible work. And so I appreciate you very much.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you for all that you're doing. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'll let you know when this comes out. I'm not sure when it'll be. It'll probably be next week, actually, because I'm starting to run out of... I usually have a big backlog, and I'm running out, so I think you're going to be fairly soon, actually.
Okay.
And we can talk about that and when it comes out and what it looks like, though. And yeah, I'll keep you posted for sure.
Thank you.
All right. Well, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much.
You too. Thank you. Have a good night or morning.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to head to bed, so yeah.
Okay.
Catch you later, Nicole. Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.